Welcome back to the Backwards History Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Will, here with my co-host, Kevin. Say hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Shut up, Kevin.
Now, are you saying that because you want to or because you're told to?
I don't know. Am I offended on my own, or am I offended because someone told me to be offended?
Only you can answer that question. You think for yourself.
What? I'm supposed to think for myself? It's 2020. Social media tells me what to think.
It does. It tries to very, very hard.
But before social media tells you what to think, we're going to tell you what we think, and then we're going to tell you to go form your own opinion. That's a novel approach in 2020. But before we do that, I want you to go like, share, subscribe, do those social media thingy things. Go like, share, subscribe. Mike Ramsey Music for being nice enough to let us use his song Charlotte for our intro and outro. Just help us out on the podcast. Tell everybody you know about these two guys you either want to refute or you want to cheer on and agree with. We don't care either way. And if you have something to say, we got social media for you to go and tell us about it. Mm-hmm. But until then, we're going to give you another piece of our minds for the next about 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. So since this quarantine started, or since this election year started and things got super crazy all year long, first with a pandemic, now with riots, or protests that turned to riots, that turned to full-on secession from the United States of America in the form of Chaz. And then suddenly everybody cares about a holiday that only a select few people really even talked about.
Very select.
That is now everywhere because Trump decided to have a rally on said day. All of a sudden, Juneteenth is at the forefront of every modern media organization's calendar, other than well, today is Juneteenth, blah, blah, blah description, and in other news, what you would have gotten in other years.
Exactly.
But now you search Juneteenth, and everybody's got something within the last 4 days posted.
Oh, yeah.
And we're unfortunately going to be one of those. But thankfully, we're going to miss the wave by posting this on Tuesday. I'm sorry this is not following our normal release schedule of Monday. But we wanted to miss this wave and possibly get a hold of the people that wanted to hear about it. Now, Juneteenth. I've always known about it. Mm-hmm. As a fan of history, I've always been aware of it. And I've always kind of wondered why it wasn't talked about. Pretty much ever. Mm-hmm. In most circles. But it seems this year that you literally go search Juneteenth and there's an abundance of stuff. And you'll see stuff 2-3 days old, and then all of a sudden you'll see a 4-year gap.
Oh, yeah.
But those of us, or those of you, that don't know about Juneteenth, we've got this thing called a resident historian by the name of Kevin.
What's up?
That's going to explain it to you.
Thank you, Will. But Juneteenth is a holiday that has been on the forefront of all media this last week or so. And to Will's point, it's one that is known by certain groups. It gets a little notoriety in most years as hey, Juneteenth, by the way. But this year, because the president decided to hold a rally on that day, it brought more attention to it. Not always positive, but it had a positive effect. I think now more people are aware. And being aware of the holiday, people are, everybody's got to go do their social media stuff like, oh, we're celebrating Juneteenth. All right, but I didn't see you do it last year. And it's following this trend of just a lack of sincerity when it comes to anything that deals with social justice and social change. And I've seen a lot of people posting online of, hey, you were all with us a week ago when we were fighting to, reform police. We were trying to, fight for equality for everybody. And then it's not trendy as much and support has just dropped off. So people are calling them out on their lack of sincerity.
Maybe that's because some people decided to take over several city blocks.
Right.
That
could have something to do with it. But Juneteenth is a holiday that is celebrated it has been celebrated for many, many decades as a day that's selected to commemorate the end of institutional slavery in the United States. The story goes, General Granger, he makes it to Texas in 1866, in June 19th, and gives Order Number 3, which effectively he takes control of the territory and implements Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation there. Now, this day had been selected because it's the outlier of the Confederate-held territory. It's the last, hey, we've made it and we've subdued the last of the rebel soldiers, and it's effectively done. Now, there are other days that groups celebrate the end of slavery in America. The Emancipation Proclamation signed January 1st, 63. Other people pick the end of the Civil War, which is April of 65. And others select the day it's officially outlawed by the 13th Amendment, January 31st of 1865. So there's a lot of days that different groups have picked for various reasons, mostly personal, if I had to, put a fine point on it. But Juneteenth was one that people it fell by the wayside. It didn't seem to have a strong impact until recently, until the outrage culture got a hold of it. And I've noticed even at my job, they've decided this year to, have celebrations with it, which I think is great. But we didn't do this last year. No one cared last year.
No one cared until they were told to care.
Exactly.
And once they were told to care, all of a sudden, oh my God, burn the world down. We're celebrating this day, which those of us who enjoy, for lack of a better way to put it, history, thought about it literally every year.
Right.
I'm just going to be blunt. I'm a white American male. And I literally thought about Juneteenth every year. Granted, I think about it on June 10th because June 10th sounds like Juneteenth, even though it's not the correct day. Me as a white American that enjoys history, I thought about Juneteenth every single year. Can't say that for most of my counterparts of any race.
Okay.
Granted, one race is affected more than others, but I can guarantee you that not everyone of any particular race thought about it as an entirety, because no one's the same regardless of race. Mm-hmm. And no one even paid it any attention until they were told to pay attention by social media. And I think social media is a huge detriment to our mental and sociological health right now.
I'd have to agree with you with that. Because people are so aware of things now, it's a lot to process in a short amount of time. And one thing that has been just, gnawing at my soul, if you will, is people on all sides of these arguments misrepresenting history to prove a point.
Which drives us nuts. We told y'all at the beginning of us posting this podcast, I don't know if we say it anymore, but our goal is to battle misinformation and miseducation when it comes to history, especially when it applies to today. And nothing espouses that whole theme, at least in recent history, than literally what is going on right now. It's all a wash because there's so much misinformation coming out of all kinds of sources. There's memes that I correct by people every day. Literally every day, that are giving out half information or twisted information, or sometimes entirely false information, like completely photoshopped pictures.
Oh, absolutely.
And people are blocking me so that people don't see me correcting them. It's ridiculous.
And like I said, it's on all sides of arguments. It's not one particular group trying to prove a point. It's all.
Yeah, I've corrected both sides of the current situation.
Right. It's
because if anybody who's a listener knows,
Right.
I am 100% behind the idea of more accountable police in the United States, because there have been too many loopholes given to law enforcement or the judiciary branch or whatever in instances of injustice towards American people, towards the citizens.
Right.
I don't give a crap what color you are. If you're an American citizen, that's all I need to know.
Right. And like you said, this is something you've been very passionate about as long as I've known you. And now,
I was talking out about police brutality and police misconduct before it was the cool thing to do. And some of the people that I correct today or that I talk to today that are huge proponents of police accountability or defund the police or whatever are some of the same people who shouted me down.
Oh, very vocal.
When I started it 2 years ago, I did it. But they're huge. I've always had a problem with. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. I wish I would have screenshotted what you sent me a couple years ago.
The power of documenting. But yeah, this outrage culture of, well, this is what's trendy now for me to try to take up and support. And by all means, if you feel the need to support causes, that's great. But without a very sincere effort put into it, you'll be far more detrimental to the movement than you ever could be, I guess, apathetic towards it. Yeah, I've always said when people are like, well, how do you feel about, flags and statues? I'm like, they don't really address the issue of social injustice or change.
You change the flag, you change the statue. What are you really changing?
Right.
Nothing. Once you put your effort towards something to actually do some good.
Right. I mean, there's plenty of amazing charities and nonprofit organizations across the world that deal with true social justice issues and
or put your effort towards going to your city council meeting on a regular issue or an actual issue that may espouse change. But you want to go to the city council meeting or protest or stand around the courthouse over a piece of stone on a platform that's been there for 100 years. You take it down. It literally does nothing other than stops you from seeing it. It doesn't do anything else.
It doesn't. And the whole argument behind these removal movements, if you will, is we're trying to create change. You're not changing. You're just moving things. You're just... The whole issue started with police brutality. All right. And it's, since evolved into other issues. I understand that. But you're wanting to remove inanimate objects. You're not trying to change the institution.
Why don't you protest the Supreme Court and actually make them realize that they need to rehear the case against qualified immunity? That's something that really needs to be done. Or really protest for police officers to have to hold their own liability insurance like doctors do.
Great idea.
Those two changes right there would cause a huge amount of change in the way things are done. Now, on that note, while I feel like defunding the police is a good idea to an extent, because, or not necessarily defunding or more regulating said funding. I saw a picture the other day of one of the police officers during the riots. He was holding a single shot grenade launcher.
Oh my God.
It was to shoot tear gas grenades and that kind of stuff. Okay. The particular model he had is no good past about 100 meters. Mounted on top of it was a $300 EOTech holographic sight. And guess who paid for it? The taxpayers, on a weapon that literally does not need it.
Right.
That's where I see defunding as a potential positive, or regulating the funding.
I can definitely see that. put that money towards, in my opinion, better training.
We've had riots for how long?
About a month now.
How many IEDs have you seen used during these riots?
None.
How many RPGs have you seen used during these riots?
None.
How many explosives of any kind have you seen used during these riots, other than fireworks?
Fireworks.
Literally, fireworks have been used.
They have. That's as far as any explosive, just fireworks.
Why the f*** does the sheriff's department or a police department need a military MRAP with a V-shaped underside to deflect IED explosions from the Department of Defense?
That's a really good question.
You know how many have them?
How many?
A lot. I don't know the exact number. I know a lot of police departments and sheriff's departments bought those.
They do.
Military surplus.
What's the old saying? One hand washes the other.
Why would they need that? They don't.
They don't.
But they spent how much of your and my money?
The military-industrial complex needs money.
And here's an argument that I've heard. Well, you don't live here. You didn't pay for this. You don't live in Minneapolis. You didn't pay for this. If you've never heard of federal grants for police departments and sheriff's departments, maybe you need to look those up. If they got a federal grant, that's money from everybody, not just the people who live in your particular municipality or county.
Right.
Now, for those of you listening that think I am on the side of BLM, Antifa, or anyone that happens to currently occupy the area known as, or formerly known as Chaz, currently known as CHOP.
Formerly known as.
Right. Like formerly
Prince.
known as Prince, yeah.
Oh, Lord.
No. Because the same people that defend Chaz or CHOP also, just a week prior to their taking over of anywhere from 3 to 6 blocks, I don't know what it is at this current moment.
Depends on which news you watch.
God, I've heard so many different depictions of the area, but you were calling people who seceded from the Union traitors.
Yeah.
Now, in organizing your own area of 3 to 6 blocks, you have now seceded from the United States of America. So you are now traitors. So by the same law that you would hold people from 200 years ago to, you are to be shot or whatever.
Executed.
Whatever version of capital punishment you want. That's your punishment. If you want to be held by the same standard you made a week ago.
Turnabout's fair play, I suppose.
Right. But my biggest problem, and the whole point of this episode, is the outrage culture, the directed outrage that only comes from social media or particular talking heads on the national media that is no longer journalists, they're reporters. They read teleprompters. You've probably seen the videos where people have spliced together about 100 different news organizations all over the country, literally reading the same script. One particular quote threatens our democracy, and you'll hear it about 100 times in the same video.
Right.
I know I've shown you that one, Kevin.
Yeah.
And I'll probably find this and post it on our Facebook page after this is done.
Awesome.
Granted, a lot of the reason that Juneteenth has gotten a lot of publicity this year, more than anything else, or any other year, outside of the community that values history as it is, and not how we want it to be, or how we want to normally see it.
Right.
A lot of the reason that media outlets have been covering June 19th when they never, ever cared about it, be honest, when they never cared about it, is because President Trump decided to hold a rally on June 19th. I don't know if it was intentional or not. If it was, it was. If it wasn't, it wasn't. But he made a statement that he made it very popular.
He did make that statement.
Is he wrong?
Yeah, hard to argue with him.
I'm a realist when it comes to everybody.
Right.
It's hard to argue that he was wrong because if he had not decided to hold a rally on that very day,
would it have gotten the attention it's gotten?
Because Trump decides to hold a rally on Juneteenth. And then all of a sudden, the internet exploded. Mm-hmm. Do your own test. Here's an opportunity we'll give you to do your own test on Juneteenth's popularity over the years. Mm-hmm. Go to YouTube, on your phone, on your computer, whatever. Type in Juneteenth, Juneteenth, Juneteenth. Mm-hmm. And then sort it by release date. You will have an abundance of releases within the last week. And then you will see a huge gap.
Massive.
When I did it myself, I saw, within hours of me searching. And then I saw within a few days or a day of me searching. And then all of a sudden, a gap of 4 years. And then 7 years. And then 8 years. To the beginning of YouTube. Not saying no one cared about it.
Right.
But at least no one cared to make content about it.
Right.
Until the last few weeks.
And I had a similar occurrence when I was, doing the research, trying to, nail down dates and facts about it. I kept seeing the exact same document show up, word for word, across the board, like the newer content.
Yeah, it's like one publication came out with an article about it, and like 10 different YouTube outlets decided to take that one document and make it into a video.
Right, and so it got to the point I was like, you know what, go old school and find a book.
Well, when I did my research, what I did was I put it on YouTube. The internet's my jam, but I put it on YouTube and I sorted by release date. But I wanted to search for things that were from at minimum a year ago. Or actually, I tried to search for it from prior to the Trump administration to avoid any kind of media bias.
Good idea.
Involved in the information that I was given. So I searched for the oldest possible information on YouTube, which is relatively young compared to information as a whole, like Kevin's version of information, which is books,
newspaper articles,
which is generally older than the internet,
typically.
And because I feel like too much of what we find on the internet and in sources that are solely internet based are too aptly dictated by whatever source they got their information from, rather than necessarily reputable sources.
Right.
Is that fair?
Very fair.
So, we're critics of all sources of information. We're critics of all people who make statements, but especially presidents. The only one that we fully back
was the first.
is the first one. Oh, George, because we got little George sitting there staring at us while we make this podcast. Trump may not be wrong when he said he made it very famous, because if he said he didn't like black licorice, suddenly everybody would be a fan of black licorice. So when Trump said he made something very famous and everybody argues against him,
they're kind of proving his point.
But because he made his rally on the same day as another day that he may have been very insensitive in doing so, given the fact that people label him as a racist.
A lot.
May not have been the most tactful move for everyone. Can take into account his base. Aunt Jemima.
Oh, Lord.
I know it's just a syrup. I know it's just a syrup, and that's not the point. You're attacking Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben's, Mrs. Butterworth. Think about this. Everyone wants to bring up Mrs. Green, the original face of Aunt Jemima. Mm-hmm. Yes, she was born into slavery. Mm-hmm. And then depicted on the bottle for several years. Some outlets say that she died a relatively wealthy woman. Mm-hmm. Some outlets would have you believe that she died still not able to afford anything. I don't know, and I don't pretend to know which is the truth. However, one thing that everyone is ignoring in the Aunt Jemima argument is the current woman that's about to be replaced with nothingness, as in Aunt Jemima will be gone, her face will be gone, came after that. They already changed the face of Aunt Jemima because of the potential issues. Mm-hmm. And now you're looking to erase her history. Her grandchildren have already come out and said that they are very upset that their family history is about to be erased.
And it all stems from a lack of historical understanding and context.
Everybody's outraged because of the original face of Aunt Jemima, which has already been changed. So you should already be sufficiently pacified.
Yeah, I see that.
Because they took away the racial stereotype. The lady that is on the current bottle agreed to be there. Depicted as herself, as a cook. I heard the argument today by a guy on TikTok, shared by a friend of mine, that knows the way I feel about the way race should be in the United States. Mm-hmm. The melting pot mentality, the melting pot beautifulness that we're supposed to espouse here.
And rich diversity.
I've been using the word espouse. That's the word of the day.
That's the word of the
if
day.
You email us the word espouse as the word of the day, you might get a prize. You might. Never know till you email us. Espouse.
Be sure to spell
word of the day. Right. I'll be honest. I'm a little afraid to talk about this because of the cancel culture in our current society. Because I'm afraid that somebody's going to call me racist just because I have a differing opinion. But the argument that I heard was that the fact that we enjoy the imagery of Aunt Jemima because of the mammy, the black mammy figure, which was basically the nanny of plantation owners' children. Keeping their children alive and fed and taken care of and blah, blah, blah. That was the quote-unquote stereotype that Aunt Jemima was quote-unquote, quote-unquote's not our thing. It's air quotes.
Air quotes. What are you doing?
That Aunt Jemima depicted in her original standing. Mm-hmm. And someone said that that's who we associated with. No, I never did. For two reasons. One, I'm going to spell it out really, really easy to understand. And please, God, understand this. I had nothing to do with slavery. I had nothing to do with slavery. So I did not ever associate that with that. Point number two, the face of Aunt Jemima was already changed by the time I was even coherent to this world. My grandmother was born in 1920. If she hadn't passed 5 years ago, she would be 100 years old this coming August. That's 1920, was 100 years ago this year. How many people do you know, Kevin, that are more than 100 years old?
Personally, none.
no one alive was a slave or a slave owner. Please, God, get that through your heads. Anybody who thinks that anybody today is a direct beneficiary or the opposite of slavery directly, no one alive or their grandmother, other than maybe one or two people on the planet, are even old enough to have been alive during slavery. I will not apologize for my opinions. I will never ask Kevin to apologize for my opinions. And I will never apologize for Kevin's opinions. And I don't think Kevin would ever ask me to.
No, definitely not.
That's the beauty of living where we live. This is the United States of America. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievance. Now, I read that to make this point. Let me caveat. I do not, and I will not, ever support racism. I believe that the beauty of the United States is based on the melting pot principle that we were founded upon. And I believe that none of this would ever have been a problem if we would have actually followed the words in the Declaration of Independence, where it said that all men are created equal. However, by virtue of the fact that we have the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression, the freedom to be whoever we want to be, unfortunately, and me being the constitutionalist that I am, I will support the free speech of people that I absolutely 100% do not agree with. That includes any, I say liberal, but that implies that I'm a conservative. But I'll say liberal or conservative that stands outside of what I believe to be the truth. Unfortunately, it is 100% your right to be racist. It is 100% your right to be a bigot. Thus is the beauty and the downfall of being a country of freedom. You do not get to pick and choose what other people believe. You do not get to pick and choose what other people are allowed to feel legally. And as far as anything institutionally, you are not allowed to be racist or bigoted. But as far as your own personal opinion, your own personal feelings, that is between you and God. That is your right. Regardless of what anybody feels, regardless of what I feel, what Kevin or anybody listening, it is your right to feel any way you want to feel. And that is the beauty of being an American. And if you would take that from anybody else, their ability to have a differing of opinion from your own, you are the problem. But as always, we don't want you to take what we say as fact. We don't want you to take us as experts. We're just two dudes with microphones. We want you to do your own research, form your own opinions, trust, but verify.